Hey, everyone.
Hello.
I'm finishing my lunch really, really quick. Who else are we waiting on? I know Jody said she may not be able to make it.
So I did not hear from anybody about not coming.
Okay. So you guys want to go ahead and get started, or are we? Oh.
Did we hear from county schools?
Oh, that's right. I was thinking Ashley was county.
She is.
Okay. Oh, okay.
County schools?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, Ashley.
And I am emailing Ellen Craig right now to ask if she.
Oh, okay. Region 10, yes. Are we able to go ahead without Ellen?
Yes, we don't have quorum requirements for programming.
Okay, that's right. I can't keep any of it straight, hardly. Okay. Well, thanks to Jenny for covering the past 2 programs meetings for me. I really appreciate that. Agenda, approval of the agenda. Is everyone good with that? Okay. On the meeting notes, did everyone have a chance to review the meeting notes from last month? And you good with those to approve? All right. Evidence-based practices training follow-up discussion. So from what Jenny told me and from what I read from the notes, there was some discussion about CHINs and a possible work group. What was some of the discussion around that? I know we're getting ready to start a work group as part of our capstone for Georgetown to focus solely on CHINs, and Mark Moore is leading that work group. I'm not sure that he's reached out to anyone yet to participate in it, but it sounds like there may have been discussion about it or about starting another one. I wasn't sure.
Well, I don't know that we knew about that one, so I'd like to hear more about that. And I know some of the special work you guys have been doing hasn't, the county hasn't been able to be involved in it, and we certainly would like to participate in any CHINs work group if we're able.
Right. No, I think that would be good. Definitely to participate in that. We hated having to leave the county out of everything. And I don't know if I've sent you guys all of the videos, the recordings, but I'm not sure. I think, so here's my thought. I need to follow up with him on that. And if it has to just be people involved with the city, I think that one of the city people involved with programs could definitely be on the group, because I feel like we need rather, I don't know, we could have a separate CHINs work group as well, but it's kind of like just doing the same thing. And it would be difficult for me to do anything or be able to make any leeway with anything without Mark, since he supervises all of that. So I'm wondering if a programs representative can be on that work group, and then that representative can relate to programs or work somehow. I don't know. It's not making much sense in my head now.
Yeah, for me, it's really problematic to not have a place at the table when, this has come up as a community-wide issue, and to not be allowed to participate in the primary vehicle for addressing it is just a problem from the county perspective, who's left out of the group.
No, I totally agree. And we had actually at one point started talking about bringing in county people when we started the work groups. So Alice, would that be you who would want to do that? Or do you have someone else who you would want on the work group, like Erica? Or
I would want to talk with my supervisors in terms of the identification process. I mean, I certainly could do it, particularly if they were not available, because we do see it as hugely problematic the way it's playing out right now. And certainly want to help think through how it could be differently. It may be better to have somebody who's actively working with supervising those cases than me, who's a level removed, although I have, some information. But I could definitely look at that if the opportunity is extended to us. We would find representation.
okay. So why don't you work on that with your supervisors, and I will stress the importance of having county representatives in all of our work groups. I know Martha and I are heading up one on violations of probation, and are looking for people. But so far, I mean, we've talked to community people, but we haven't pinned down any Charlottesville people. And I think while we're in the process, we should go ahead and bring the county in, because we do function. Casey Foundation doesn't seem to understand or be able to wrap their mind around it, how our community kind of functions more as one versus two different localities. And we've tried to explain that to them, and for some reason they just can't wrap their heads around it. Because I would have loved to have included all of our Albemarle data in all of our performance measures as well. But let me work on that, since I lead the full team, and convince them that that's what we need to do. And then you kind of see with your supervisors who might want to be part of that. We're also doing a family engagement as well. So if there's someone, I know it's not really, well, it could be related to Jens too, but if there's anyone that you think might want to work on family engagement with us as well, or even the violations, let us know also. But I will strongly push that agenda, because I agree with you. And I'm sorry, I can't help you out more with Jens. I can help you out once they go to court, but I can't do a lot beforehand at all.
That rarely happens. So,
Yes, I hear you. Are there other things related to that topic that anybody else wants to talk about?
Well, I guess just moving forward for this group, is it helpful to hear what that work group is doing? Exactly, like maybe you could get some more information from Mark. And then program could figure out, and then also figure out like how the county fits into that. And if not, then what we do with that, and what we do as a group.
I think everybody. Yeah. So my internet's acting up and I didn't hear a lot of what you said, but I think the gist was to have updates regarding the work groups for programs.
Well, I was just saying, if it's helpful for program to hear more about what this work group is doing and how that fits, one, with the members around programs table, but then also, you know, what program is needing and wanting to do. I'm just wondering if that's helpful as like a next step.
I think so. Right now they haven't started. So they're not doing anything.
Like
at
they're
the
a
moment.
charge or
tell
charter
you.
or something like that that you could share.
They haven't done that yet. What I can
Oh,
tell
okay.
you,
I know sometimes they're handed that.
I can tell
versus
you,
coming up with it.
because, okay, so we wanted to form the work group and have a co-chair before we start doing like the charter. It's not necessarily a charter, but it's similar to a charter. But the goals that they're going to primarily focus on are going to be the goals that we presented in our capstone project. However, we know that if we don't have community buy-in and community input from all levels, especially from DSS and the schools and Region 10, none of that is going to be successful in any way, and nothing's going to change. Are you guys hearing me okay?
I am, and I would just say, you know, since we weren't allowed to participate, I don't know, but I know a very limited amount about what you've done in that project to date. I don't know what the goals
Okay.
are you've identified, and it would be helpful maybe just to hear a little more about that. You know, if everybody else already knows this, maybe I can catch up with you at a separate time, Krista, because I don't want to be redundant for folks who might know, but I'm not familiar.
So would it be helpful, maybe Alice, if we can set up, or if I can set up something with some of the county people to go through that? I'm happy to send you the recordings of the videos, but they can be fairly long if you don't want to watch all of them. And I can set something up to meet with you guys to kind of let you know where it started, where we are, and where we're going, if that would be helpful.
I think it would. For
I
me,
think that website, Krista, is really, I thought was just like full of information too.
Yes.
That would be like, you know, a good thing, Alice, to like read through. I think it has a good overview.
And which website was that?
I think Krista would have to send it to you, the link.
Yeah, and I can, and I may have sent it to a couple of people already, but I'll send it to you, Alice, and you can distribute the link as you would like. But I'm still happy to have follow-up conversations with you. All of the resources that we've used, it's a landing page through Casey and Georgetown. But all of the resources we've used, the 5 different convening sessions we had are all recorded on there with PowerPoints for each session. So it will provide a whole lot of information for everyone. And then, like I said, I'm happy to still follow up with you guys and have more conversation about it.
Okay. that'd be
Krista,
great.
is there somebody from DSS already on the work group, or has that like already formed? I was just wondering if I already had somebody on it.
So Hunter Smith was reaching out to someone from DSS, and I'm not sure. I know Jesse Trocum was really involved and really interested in some of it. Mona was, I think Martha and I were maybe going to reach out to Mona to see if she wanted to work with us on violations. But if you're interested, if you know of anyone else who would be a good fit for any of that, particularly Chins right now, then let us know.
Okay.
And Krista, I would have the
Yeah, this
same
is-
question. Do you know from, this is Ellen, and apologies for being
Mhm.
late. Apparently I have saved a bad link somewhere along the way and was sitting thinking I was, anyway. But Krista, I'm curious if anybody from Region 10 is, has been picked already for work groups. Have you had folks connected, or do you know?
I feel like Hunter was reaching out to join Minor, I believe.
Okay.
We are looking for someone, Martha and I, for someone to work with us on violations and court orders. And I don't think we really talked about anyone yet. So if you have ideas about that, I don't think Mark has really thought about anybody yet for Chins. So you might want to think about that and let me know. And I think that's the 3 right now, because we're kind of stalled with the police diversion, with everything going on. So those are the 3 right now. We had hoped to have everything up and running in August, but with vacations and then all of our staff deciding to go elsewhere to work, it's been a little crazy. We're getting promoted.
Just as so I was looking at who was absent last time for when I was looking over sort of the minutes, and it looks like Mark or is one of the folks that would be normally attending this meeting, alternating with Jim. And so I was curious, since some of this lives in Mark's world with the chins and things, if that's, I know that he and Jim share the FAPT co-chair spots. So I was.
Oh, I see that.
It would be
That
very
would be
easy
good.
it would be good.
Yes.
So I don't know, Krista, if you
Um,
have power to maybe remind or invite, I don't know. I don't know where that lives or who that lives with, but.
We haven't had
Um,
Mark or Jim coming because I've been doing the FAPT update. And I don't think there's been anything significant that they needed to come talk about. But I think if we're, I'll leave it up to Krista if she feels like she could have Mark come and talk more about that.
I can ask him. I can ask him. So, yeah. But if we want to, if you want to do it more of like FAPT updates, but I'll talk to him. He's out right now for a couple of days for some family things, but I will talk to him. Let's see. Anything else on that? So I'm going to send the landing page link to you, Alice, and I can send it to Erica also. And anyone else who didn't participate who wants that, let me know. I can send all of that. I will talk to Mark about the CHIN's work group and let him know some of the things we've talked about and see if we can get him to attend some of the programs meetings. I think I'm going to have to call in because my internet's really not working well. If you guys can give me just a second. Can you all hear me now? Oh. Oops.
Can hear you, but there's an echo.
So while we're waiting for Krista, since I was late coming in, where are we in the agenda at this point?
We are on 4.
Okay, thank you.
So you didn't miss much.
Okay. I'm back. Can you guys hear me now?
Mhm.
Okay, good. Sorry. Our internet is getting fixed eventually. We have confirmation. Okay, I'm just going to pull my agenda back up real quick. All right. Updates, FAPT updates.
Did you all receive the FACT surveys or have any questions about those?
Yep, I think
I didn't want to jump in. Is it my turn? I didn't want to cut you off, Katie, if you were.
No, go ahead. I mean, I don't know that we had, I just wanted to see if there was any comments or anything to share with FACT from those. But that's all I really had.
I don't think that we really had anything different either. Just what I know Jennifer was able to attach. I'm losing all my emails. I've got so many emails open now, I can't find it, but I know that we had lots of attachments and stuff. I think stuff is moving along, same as usual for us.
CSA coordinators, Katie and Jennifer.
Yep, so this one, I just wanted to start with the public comment for the SEC because that might take us a little bit of time to get through. And then based on that, we can see where we're at with time. So I sent those documents out to you guys. There are 2 policies that the SEC is moving forward with. One is in regards to an MDT, which is an alternative FAPT. So that policy really doesn't apply to us. But the other one is about family engagement. And so we already have in our local policy a family engagement part in there. But this is something that the SEC is putting forward. And so it's really just an opportunity for you all to decide if you feel like CPMT should make public comment on these. And so it can be either that we have no comment, that we support it, or if we have any concerns about what they're proposing, that we could put that in public comment. So what you guys are doing is really just making a recommendation to CPMT about whether they should be the ones to make the public comment, because that's where it would have to come from. So I don't know if folks had time to look at it or not. I sent out, like I said, I sent the 2 policies that are open for public comment. And then I also sent our local policy. So I don't know if folks need like a little bit of time to just kind of review it. Or if folks want to have a conversation about that. There are definitely some things in there that are not currently in our local policy. So it's just a question of whether we need to maybe change our local policy to reflect this. But really just is about public comment from CPMT.
And a couple of things, you know, this is written with the understanding that service planning is happening at FAPT. And to just keep in mind, we don't do that here in Charlottesville, Albemarle. We leave all the service planning up to the child specific teams and our partner agencies. And so that's really done outside of the FAPT process. So if you're reading some of this, it's going to read as if the service plan is being developed in FAPT, and we don't do that. And it was interesting, like, I can't believe it's been 10 years ago that we came up with our family engagement policy when they asked us to do it the first time. But when we wrote that, we also created tools to address some of the things that are in the what do you call it? The thing the state sent out. So like our IFSP consent and participation form that was created for parents and family members to have a place to say something if they weren't able to, in writing, if they weren't able to come to the meeting. We created a FACT brochure and a CSA brochure. And so really those tools were created to kind of get at some of these things that are outlined in this SEC policy. So like, I really feel like we're in pretty good shape. Our policy might not be outlined this exact way or have all of these elements. But I do feel like we're in pretty good shape. And again, just keeping in mind that our procedure is different than most other localities, and you know, taking that into consideration when you're reading this too. I do think it's an opportunity to look at our local policy and the tools we have to see if we need to add anything or change anything or update it in any kind of way, because it was 10 years ago. But just some other points to keep in mind.
Okay. Too, just the one thing I noticed in looking at the comment that was made on the city family satisfaction survey, and maybe it was something in the family engagement for public comment, was just making, ensuring people are more aware of other services. I don't know if that was just specific to that case or if that is anything we need to look at.
So maybe how we let families know that CSA is a thing.
Maybe that's what I'm getting at. Maybe I'm trying to merge the two.
Mhm.
So, but I think that's what, yeah, I think that was what I was talking about, actually.
Yeah, we have part of our webpage is about family engagement. You know, I don't know that we've ever had something or gone to a partner agencies and said, hey, disseminate this information. I think we've been a little leery about doing that because we don't want to open the floodgates, but then you also have to have a mandate. So not just any kid can receive CSA funding. So I think we've been careful about how we advertise FACT and CSA. So I don't know how we do that without opening kind of the floodgate for just anybody to, and of course we want to help as many people as we can, but there is a balance.
No, that's good points. I was just,
I mean, we
just
certainly
wondering.
have families that call, at least I have, and say, I saw your website and I want to get a mentor for my kid. So we start talking more, and you know, they're not going to meet any mandate type, or maybe they do, and I try to connect them with Region 10 or the school special education department or something. It doesn't happen often, but it does happen.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think we're good as far as family engagement.
So just two of the things that I was going to sort of point out for folks in this public comment is sort of pointing out to CPMT in our local policy. I feel like we do it, like Katie said, we do a good job already of kind of putting in there the different things that we've done for family engagement. And I feel like we're way ahead of a lot of localities when it comes to that. The two things that sort of came to mind for me as I was looking at this, that may need to be addressed in a local policy revision, would just be adding sort of this component of like a virtual platform for things, which we currently have in place, but like we don't specifically say that in our policy. And so that may be something that CPMT should address as making it an option for families as a way to participate. So that's one thing that came to mind for me. And that one was on page 3. Let's see, it was 3.3.5, and it was A2. And again, it's just making as many accommodations for families as we can. And that's sort of the whole point of it. The other one that came to mind for me is on page 4, it's letter F. Local CSA programs should engage in outreach regarding the CSA process to marginalized youth and families. And it kind of goes through that different list. So during the CSA statewide coordinators meeting, this was the one that came up for folks where they were really saying, like, how do we demonstrate this? And what are we going to be called into question about from OCS about how we're doing this? And so this was one that they were really looking for a little more guidance from OCS about. And then Scott had said that I guess they are putting together an equity and inclusion work group. And so I don't know that there may be more tools or something that may come forward about this particular item from that. But this is another thing, like it's in the CPMT work plan is something that they're looking at. But as far as having something listed in our local policy specifically about this, we don't have that. So that's the other thing that I just wanted to sort of highlight for folks if they had any thoughts about that.
Definitely agree with getting clarification because we are constrained by what their policy says in terms of criteria you have to meet to serve you. And so when they have such a broad statement about who you're reaching out to, there'd be a lot of people that wouldn't meet their other policy criteria. They need internal alignment with the OCS policy to be able to do that in any meaningful way. The other, and I did not have a chance to read them in terms of spending any time. I'm just coming off vacation this week and I've been busy catching up and didn't read all that, but I did skim them. And so this is more my at a glance impression, but the OCS one out there, they definitely, the language is updated and there's more references with where you can tell they're trying to use an equity lens and how they're wording their policy, and that our policy, local policy written 10 years ago, I don't think has that same language infused in it. And so, I do think this would be an important thing to look at and refresh and update. And I also, and just again, at a glance with both of them, I'm curious, because the OCS one had a phrase in there about, the commitment to equitable outcomes. And so I'm curious, what do we do programmatically to track our outcomes and who we're serving from an equity lens, and is there equivalency or equality, with that? Like, do we do that, and where is that data?
Yeah, CPMT, when they revised their work plan, equity inclusion was certainly something that was a new goal that they created. And one of the things that they've been talking about is wanting to look at the data around demographics and who served and all of that. So it's certainly on their kind of agenda to work on some of that as a CPMT looking at our CSA programs. But I agree. I think it's worth looking at the language, and because the policy was written 10 years ago, kind of infusing some more updated language.
So Alice, do you think it might be worth mentioning as part of CPMT, a recommendation of CPMT, that in the public comment they make that under this number F, that it should include language about, for those who are CSA eligible versus this sort of very broad statement?
I think so. and/or broaden eligibility. You know, it'd be really nice if they would commit to some primary or secondary prevention funding and not like I'm at imminent risk of entering foster care. And then you could do the outreach to more marginalized populations.
Can we get clarification if the outreach part means, you know, could it include making sure that our community partners are well aware of CSA services, the community partners that might be the ones, you know, coming in contact with these marginalized youth maybe before it gets to the point of coming to our attention. I'm just wondering like what outreach really means.
So do folks have any other thoughts about, I mean, overall, do you all feel like you would recommend that CPMT support this policy? Okay. And then I was just going to say, would you all be in agreement that we don't really have a reason to comment on the MDT policy since we don't use that here? Everybody's in agreement.
Can I ask a question about that? There's a multidisciplinary team around truancy that I think Carol Hernandez leads. Does it have anything to do with that, or do you know?
This policy, I think, was specific to FAPT, if you have an alternative to your FAPT.
Okay. Well, I know when I first started here, when the judge would order county truancy cases to go to the MDT or FAPT or other MDT for recommendations, we traditionally took those cases to that team. But I feel like we get more robust recommendations from FAPT. So we've really kind of stopped doing that. But I wasn't sure if that's what I was talking about, or if that was FAPT ordained or what.
Does that team still exist?
From what I understand, it does. It did as of right before COVID, at least.
Because that was just for county cases, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and I think they established that because they were required to take them to FAPT, and Cheryl sort of blessed this as an alternative that the judge accepted because I think it streamlined it for the purposes of truancy, particularly when that's not a category that is a mandated one for funding purposes. So coming to the, you know, like occasionally there would be cases that would also meet funding criteria, but many of them would not. So it didn't seem efficient bringing them to FAPT for review. So it was kind of a specialized thing that I think met the needs of the school folks.
Okay. All right. Anything else for CSA coordinators?
I was just looking through. So like I said, we had the state coordinators meeting. Scott had talked about the whole move of the private day and the transfer of those funds over to DOE. And he said, there's a work group that's been initiated through DOE for that. And they they've just started. So he was saying it's going to at least be into FY23 before any recommendations get approved. And it's probably going to be FY24 before any of those monies move over. So there's definitely some time, just because they still have to work out so many of the details. Even figuring out whether those become some sufficient like they are currently, or if that would change, like all of those details have to be figured out. The other thing they had, I can't remember their names now. They had a couple of ladies from VDSS about Families First, and just trying to get information about whether localities are using those evidence-based practices, the 3 that are approved, and wanting feedback about that. And so what I saw was the vast majority of localities are not currently using that. And so, there was some concern around that, and it's sort of interesting for them. I don't think they were quite as aware of how little it's being used as it is. So I'm not sure if something more may come from that. I don't know. But they obviously are still pushing for folks to be using those 3 evidence-based services that are eligible for 4E.
Did they say anything more about additional services becoming available besides those 3?
I mean, they definitely talked about ones in the works, but like they didn't have any details around when or what were. Because some of the feedback that they got from the coordinators was just, some of those services are so like eligible specific, and a lot of these eligibility requirements. And so they were trying to give that feedback. So it was an interesting conversation. One of the things that they said, and again, this kind of gets in over my head. So like Alice and Jenny, you may be much better versed in this than me, but one of the things that one of the ladies said was their goal is to have 75% of case openings for in-home for high and very high, which I guess they're talking about SDM. I'm not sure, that should be considered for these evidence-based practices. So that's the goal that they're saying that the state has set. I don't know. That was just something that they were sharing. And so again, when they were getting information like localities really aren't using these services, I think that kind of raised some red flags for them. So I'm not sure. So
That's not going to happen.
No, I mean, it's interesting to me that they're surprised that this isn't being used. When they first introduced this whole subject, like 3 years ago, and I was at one of the PAC meetings, asked over and over and over is, what are you going to do to incentivize participation for providers? Because it's a tremendous overhaul and overtake that they have to go through to become a provider. And then you only give us 3 services to choose from, and there's no providers for us. I can't send people to Roanoke. I mean, you're not going to pay us to send them to Roanoke, and you're not going to pay the customers to send them to Roanoke, and that's the closest provider for PCIT. So I don't know what you want us to do. And it blows my mind that they would be surprised by that still. But I'm glad to hear that other localities are being vocal as well and sharing the concerns. I mean, I'm with you. Like, when are we going to have more than 3 to choose from?
Yeah.
Did they address at all why it takes forever to approve something? Because they didn't exactly admit this idea of an evidence-based warehouse. Like, there's already well-established ones. So what's the holdup?
They didn't say. The one thing that I think Scott offered which was really interesting. He offered like some of these other clearinghouses that have other providers that aren't eligible for this funding because they're not approved with us, but that we could look at them for CSA. So, what do you do? But anyway, I mean, I feel like clearly, I don't think they had a very good awareness of where it stands with the localities.
Well, and I thought they had taken inventory as to, like Erica was saying, like how many, different agencies were providing that particular service. Like, it's not that, not that hard to figure out that there's nobody here.
The one thing that did come up too that I thought was interesting is the lady from Fairfax was talking, because, you know, Fairfax is big, and I think they originally started out with quite a few, and she was saying they can't sustain, like they're because they don't have the referrals that they needed to keep that up and running. And so they're running into that same thing of like, you know, if staff leave because it's such a rigid process to be a provider of this, that they can't, they're not able to keep this going. And so she was really pointing out how, you know, even for them, having the providers, like they're losing them. So
I mean, we're all struggling with hiring, so I'm sure that like that's also in other areas, right? With agencies, like if you can't, you know, retain or even hire staff to do the service, like it's gonna, you know, be problematic right there. But I mean, it doesn't even like there's an age gap too. So like of the 3 services, I think you miss age, is it 8 to 12, 6 to 12? Like, so even, so there's like those children, there's not even a service for. And we did FFT in this community also, like that's the other thing, like Region 10 did that and it didn't take off then either. And I think it does have to do with the fact that it's pretty specific to a certain type of family situation, which is not like what, you know, we have. And I don't think that I feel like what I remember reading too about FFT and MST is that it's not specific to child welfare cases and abuse neglect specifically. It's more like, you know, structural family therapy type things where, you know, there's a lot of behavior problems, which is sometimes, you know, part of a child welfare case. I'm not saying that, but when the crux of your issue is, you know, parent deficiencies and generational trauma and all that kind of stuff, like MST is not going to touch that. I just don't understand how they're so clueless.
what I thought was interesting too was how Scott was questioning like why people weren't using it or whatever. And he was saying how, you know, when DJJ went through their transformation, that there was a huge buy-in from folks about using these services. And I thought it was interesting because the localities were really quick to speak up and say, you know, those localities were involved in figuring out what's going to work best. And the DSSs did not seem to feel that way, like that they were included in what those services should have been. And so they didn't have the same buy-in that DJJ had. Mm-hmm. And then they also talked about how DJJ put in a lot more money for getting this thing up and running and doing what, you know, what they're doing versus what BDSS did. So folks were quick to kind of respond back and provide that information. So, but again, they had no time frame for when any new services would be going through. So. Trying to think what else.
PDSS,
the only other thing, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, making it you know, having to be an in-home case and then changing in-home policy where there's a lot of additional work required, paperwork and things not useful for case outcome stuff that workers have to do. Like, there's not incentive for the worker. Like, if they can find some other service to help the family, they're not going to do that one because they don't want to call it an in-home case and have, you know, like, it's just that they're making you not want to do it without because they're making it so hard to access it with what you got to do. If you're a DSS, I understand DJJ doesn't have to do the same kind of junk we have to do, but DSS has made it hard.
We just do different kinds of paperwork. Sometimes it feels like it. Well, yeah, I mean, those services are geared more towards our don't necessarily have kids for those services because of the money that was put into it. And it's kind of a negative when we're not referring a certain number of kids to either of those services. So it's kind of interesting to hear what you all are saying.
Well, you need to take into account the pandemic too, right? So like this could look a little bit different. I don't know how different, but I do think that is a kind of a huge piece of it. You know, I know we're all kind of still struggling to find people that want to enter houses, you know, on our clients' caseload. So, and, you know, I mean, I totally understand it. But, you know, we've had, you know, our like home visitors, you know, where we're trying to, you know, make sure that infants are safe and parents understand how to care for an infant, like they're not going in their house. So like, I don't think people are just like trying to sign up for this type of work these days.
Yeah, the only other update I was going to give, sort of away from that, is just letting folks know that Southstone is closing, and then Newport News Behavioral Health has stopped taking, or they're stopping. They're no longer going to take Medicaid cases, and so we're essentially losing them as a provider, more than likely as a result of that. The question becomes, they're under parent company UHS, and we do have other providers that are under UHS, and there's a question of whether they're going to follow suit, because when the new Medicaid rates came out, Newport News was the lowest. They didn't, you know, there was a ceiling that came out, and they were nowhere near that. And the other there's a couple other providers under UHS who also did not get that maximum amount. So there's a question about whether they're going to take Medicaid any longer. So it becomes a problem.
Why are they QRTPs? Like, do they then grab the $40? Is that?
No, but they're Medicaid providers. So obviously for CSA, we've got to look at Medicaid providers.
Right.
And now we've lost 2 since Southstone's closing.
Well, they'll take our kids. We just have to pay the full amount.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They won't bill Medicaid
So-
for our kids.
So one of the things that Scott talked about, or that Scott was given feedback about, was maybe having written guidance from OCS on how to do a single case agreement for an out-of-state placement, because there's the concern that we may be looking at more of those as a result of this. So he was taking that back and going to look at it. But he also said that they were trying to set up meetings with the folks from Newport News. And then I think the lady from Medicaid was supposed to help be a part of that. Again, I think it came as a surprise to them when they decided to do that. But it's sort of a larger question about whether other folks might do the same that did not get the maximum rate. So we'll see. I think that's it for the coordinators update.
Our agency updates. Any updates from any of us?
I would just echo what Jenny has referenced several times about how exceptionally difficult it is to hire folks these days, and how small applicant pools are. You know, we've had significant numbers of vacancies, and we continue in one team that have significant number of vacancies, and they've been hiring nonstop since, I don't know, June maybe. And the pools are just really, really small. And then of the people in the pool, they might not meet the state's minimum qualifications, which further shrinks options. Very challenging environment.
Yeah, we are on our second round of interviews for hopefully a PO for our office. One for Culpeper, one for us, and then Louisa will be hiring. That doesn't affect any of you guys, but hopefully we might be looking at a former intern for our office who already knows some of what she's doing. So fingers crossed, but yeah, we'll see how slow the state moves with all of that and backgrounds and everything, because we're finding too that by the time we're getting through the background process, people have already taken other jobs. And I think we had out of a pool of, well, out of 11 who screened in for those positions, I believe 5 canceled and 3 just no-showed. Yeah, without calling or anything. And one already worked for the agency and just didn't call or show. Yeah.
That makes my heart race for you. My goodness.
I'm very grateful that I am fully staffed right now because I was experiencing that as well, of just the challenges of trying to get just a candidate pool and then getting them in for interviews, and had a no-show, and yeah, it's really challenging. So I feel for all of you in doing that. And then otherwise, I don't have any particular updates beyond where we continue to get a lot of, we had a brief lull, I think, where there weren't as many new cases coming in, but that is over. And so Erica, you're going to be, I know we've sent several CHINs determinations your direction, and so we're seeing that ticking back up again.
Anyone else? All right, focus areas, case manager and provider input. Is this where we want to review the surveys? Or that might be data review. I never know what goes under what.
I think it's probably family engagement.
Okay, okay.
We want to just skip there unless there's. Well, we
Oh, wait,
our
back
guidance.
it up. I totally skipped over service provision during COVID and UR guidance. So any more update on service provision during COVID?
The only thing I was going to say is, I don't know if you guys are seeing this, but like we're starting to definitely recognize some huge issues with the postal service and people receiving things through the mail. And it's really becoming a problem that they're not getting it.
The feedback that I've heard from several case managers in child welfare is just the increasing numbers of our customers who are
COVID positive or exposed, and just, you know, again, like there's our customers, I don't even need to elaborate, our customers are positive more and more. So now that we're opening back up to the public and providers are opening back up to the public, that risk is still pretty significant. So you know, how do we continue to provide services in the community when we're finally ready to do it and able to do it, and now our customers are still unvaccinated or sick or whatever's going on?
The city announced that, I guess we're just like never opening. They just delayed it for another 6 months. So March 18th is the new date, though I think they're going to review it before January. So if you, like I am at this point, like I'm starting to kind of worry about access and stuff like that. So if you hear of any, you know, issues, please let me know about, you know, clients, you know, needing something that they don't feel like they're able to get like over the phone. I'd be more than happy to troubleshoot and make sure that we're aware of it. I think we've been figuring it out pretty well so far, but I don't know. I was just surprised they just like did another 6 months.
All right, UR guidance.
Yeah.
Ellen, do you want to update on that? I looked at the notes.
So I think we were waiting for cases after the CSA agreements had been completed for this fiscal year in order to make sure that we were capturing enough referrals or the correct folks. So I guess that would be a question of where do we stand with that. I can also add that Region 10 is continuing with, as far as COVID provision, we're doing some in-person, appropriately distanced and masked so it's a hybrid as well as continuing with teleconferencing for sessions. And the buildings are now remaining open at this point. But with, expectations of, masking, et cetera, on site.
Yeah, so Jennifer and I were able to pull a list of cases that are currently receiving mentoring for this fiscal year. And we talked about it a couple times and started looking at it and are kind of coming up against a couple of snags and wanting to make sure we are providing the data that's needed. And so I know in the city, I think there's about 43 cases. Some of them are siblings, so I don't know if that matters or not, but one of the things that we talked about was how we're going to do our sample. Do we want, and we talked about making sure our sample is representative of the providers. We don't want, if we're going to do 20 cases, we don't necessarily want 18 of those to be the same provider. So I don't know if anybody has any thoughts about that, or you guys trust us to figure that out. The other piece is that we need to figure out how we're going to do the approval, because currently we get UR approved on a case-by-case basis. And so for each kid that we're doing UR for, we need to get a FAPT approval. And it might be something that could go to CPMT for CPMT to kind of give a blanket kind of, like they would have to vote on it and approve it. But we're trying to figure out the logistics behind all of that as well. So we're a little bit further than we were, but still kind of trying to sort some things out. Jennifer, I don't know if you have anything to add.
No, not really. I mean, I think we could obviously bring it to CPMT's attention that they're going to need to take some sort of action to authorize this type of review. Since Katie said we typically do these case by case, and this is more of a kind of general looking at a certain service versus a certain kid. So I think that would need to go to CPMT. And like she said, my issue is not the sibling issue. I'm running into making sure we're calling mentoring by the right thing, because I noticed that we were missing community attention in my entire sample, which seemed not right. So I need to figure out why that is.
Do you know when you say what you're calling it, can you explain it? Like what it's named?
So we have the standardized service name of mentoring. And that's how I was trying to find these things, but I'm concerned that it's called something else with community attention and it didn't get put in as mentoring, even though I'm pretty sure it was. So I just have to figure out how to find those kids, because they're not in the sample for me.
Okay, so yes, it definitely is called something else for us. We call it Community Support Services, CSS. So we don't label it. It's not just straight out mentoring.
I think
so there's what the provider calls the service, and then there's the standardized service name. And so the standardized service name is what gets like reported to the state, and that's how we were pulling them, was under the standardized service name of mentoring. And the difference is on the city, when a case comes to FAT for community support services, I give it the label mentoring. And so it comes up as mentoring for us. Where on the county, it sounds like when a case comes to FAT for CSS, they're not labeling it as mentoring. And so that's why. And that's
I'm just going to have to go pull. I'll pull the individual cases in the IFSPs to see like what did we call it and how can I find them. But I know they should absolutely be in the sample, and I don't have any. So
were there any cases that were submitted to FAT, to county FAT, for that particular service? I'm trying to think back, because I know all about ours don't go to FAT. We use our crime control money and it goes straight to community attention.
I know that I submitted a case.
Okay. There you go then.
Just anecdotally.
I think there's probably like one or two for 2020 to 2021. So Jennifer, you can reach out to me. I have like a list
Okay.
and I probably could give you specific names. if
Okay,
that's
that would be
needed.
great. Yeah, I will do that. Thank you. So I just need a little more time to get the sample together.
That works.
So do we want to talk about when we go to CPMT about obtaining approval, or do we want to wait until we're basically ready to go, or obtaining like a blanket approval for funding? Is that what you were talking about?
So the problem is that our policy, our UR policy, only allows us to do UR for two situations, either when it's identified on a case-by-case basis by FAPT, which this was not identified as a need on a case-by-case basis from FAPT, or on a residential case. So that's the problem we're having, is our policy doesn't say UR can be used for this purpose. So basically, I think what we need to do is add language allowing us to do that. And then we're still going to have to do like an addendum for each kid or something to generate the funding piece so that Region 10 gets paid.
Okay. Got it.
So it's
And with that,
something easy, I think, to figure out. It's just kind of a procedural, logistical kind of thing.
okay. So is that something you would want me to present to them, or is that something Katie, you and Jennifer would be working on?
I think Jennifer and I, if it's a policy change, usually draft that language and I send it to them ahead of time.
Okay, okay. All right. So case manager and provider input. And provider survey link. I'm just referring to last month's notes where they have review survey results at October 6th meeting for the provider survey. But we also have our other family engagement surveys too. So we can talk about either of those throughout this section.
So the only thing I'm going to say for the county, you know, when you look at the FAPT survey results, we mail those out. And again, our response has clearly not been what it was when we were meeting in person, but we obviously are still getting some of those back. If you look at the provider satisfaction survey results, which those are the ones we've been sending electronically with a link to SurveyMonkey. I'm not sure that I could tell you how many actually went out, but clearly I don't think the results are what we're seeing when we're just sending them through the mail, which was interesting. But I do think it might be worth giving it more time just to see, you know, make sure it's going out like it should be going out. This was our initial run with it. So for us, these have been going out since July. And so we've had 2 that came in for this quarter.
It's interesting that you guys have been doing it for 3 months and got 2 back. We've been doing it for 1 and got 5 back. And
Yeah.
I can't, like, we actually don't have, I don't feel like our FAPT schedules are overwhelming or anything like that. So I wouldn't imagine that we have like a ton more cases than the county, and that's why.
So one of the things that it may be worth taking back to your agencies is just encouraging your case managers to make sure they're sending these to the folks that should be getting it and asking them to complete it.
Yeah, I had the same thought. I was wondering about that. Okay. Anything on the family engagement surveys?
So I was just back to the satisfaction surveys.
Oh, yeah.
I guess we'll share those with FAPT and CPMT. And then maybe next quarter, if we're getting more responses, we can have more of a discussion.
Okay.
Oh yeah, the one thing I was mentioned, which only comes from reading the results, and I think that whoever completed it was actually filling it out on their worker. And so if folks could just be reminded, this is actually for the provider, not for their case manager, that would be helpful.
That'd be a whole different survey.
All right.
I have a quick question around that. Just if they have multiple providers, have we had guidance or any thoughts on how that is being discussed, or any advice on that?
So, I mean, like, because we were just trying to get it up off the ground, we just listed out all the different types of services. We didn't get specific into like the provider. The one thing we did leave open is a place for comments. And if people would feel comfortable putting that in there, they're definitely welcome to do that.
I was just thinking if we're we talked about revising the survey as we kind of go along. I wonder if we want to get at specific providers, if it's easy to, beside the provider that the service type that they check, just have them fill in provider name as a way to do that. The survey is still kind of about all of that. The questions are still about all your services you're getting though. So I don't know if that's helpful or not, but.
And the other thing I was going to say is, if we find that, because again, like I can't base anything off 2 surveys, but as we go along, if we have lots of surveys to kind of look at, and I'll be honest, like I use the FAP survey as sort of my example of like, it's generally always positive, and it's always great feedback, and it makes you feel good, and it's great. But if these sort of seem to be the same way, then I don't know that it's really helpful information if it's always just glowing reports about things. If it turns into more of something like, hey, we noticed mentoring service provided a lot and we're getting some feedback about something, then it might be worth exploring that point, like if it would help to have more detail.
All right. Any additional things we want to discuss on these areas or focus areas before we move on? All right. Trauma-informed services. Any updates from anyone on trauma-informed services? All right. Any other business or new business?
Well, this isn't other business per se, but I did just in my own mind, kind of for closure, et cetera, or clarity, I wanted to loop back around to the evidence-based training, that topic on the agenda, because the whole Chin thing came about as we were discussing that training we were in and populations where there was an unmet need. And so my question with looping back around is if we've decided there's nothing to do in this group at this time on the Chins because there's this other work group going on and we don't want to duplicate or be inefficient with our efforts, is there anything then we need to do as a group just in terms of that evidence-based training and thinking about that, what we need to do in our community? Maybe we feel there's not, but I wasn't clear on that part of it as we move forward.
I mean, just going back to Chin's, I think maybe the work group or a separate work group is kind of just tabled. I don't know, we don't want to duplicate ourselves, but I also want to make sure that we're meeting the needs as programs too, I guess is what I'm saying. So just I want to get more discussion in about that. But I think that is definitely a population where we are kind of lacking some services and needs to be a focus. I don't know necessarily about any of the other evidence-based areas.
I think the idea for the reason that we went to that training was to really, identify maybe a service need in our community and then utilize that training and structure to evaluate a service that we might want to bring to this community to serve, our population. So I still feel like that is something that we probably need to examine, and also is really the charge of program as well. We're supposed to be creating, or developing or helping access, services that are not available, and that we feel like this population needs. So I think the answer is yes, Alice. We need to continue to kind of, if it's not going to be this CHINS area, then we need to look at those gaps again as a group.
And I mean, I would just suggest leaving it on our agenda as a regular item to make sure we're staying mindful of it. Okay. As far as anything additional for messaging out or responses for CPMT or anyone else? Anything else at all? Sorry, I took so long having so many problems with our internet and delayed us a little bit, but if that's it, then thanks everyone. I'll be seeing you soon. Bye.